here of a slightly unorthodox kind, because this has less to do with Kamala versus Trump and more to do with a legit surge on the part of the Jill Stein campaign in swing states among Muslim voters. So Jill Stein leads Kamala Harris outright with Muslims in these three battleground states. Vice President Kamala Harris's Muslim problem hasn't been solved as early voting begins, and it could be enough to doom her in crucial swing states. New polling of American Muslims shows the Democratic presidential nominee has yet to consolidate the demographic, and a surprising spoiler is more than holding her own in some battlegrounds. Green Party candidate Jill Stein leads Harris among the group in 6 battleground states overall, 30-28. So that's an overall survey of the 6 key battleground states per the Council on American Islamic Relations survey released Monday. And Stein, a serial candidate at this point, leads outright in Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin. 2 of these 3 races are close. One of them is not. And unfortunately for Harris, that's the one with the highest concentration of exponents of the Islamic faith. In the Grand Canyon state, Stein has 35% support to Harris's 29. She also leads Harris in Wisconsin 44-39. But the problem is most acute for the Democrat in the Wolverine state, where nearly 250,000 Muslims live amid 8.4 million registered voters. President Biden's problem with uncommitted voters in the uncompetitive primary has seemingly spilled over into Harris's general election race, despite the Veep's fitful triangulating calls for a ceasefire during her otherwise canned rally speeches. You could tell the New York Post had a fun time writing this. Harris ekes out 12% support among Muslim voters, putting her not just behind Stein's 40%, but former President Donald Trump's 18%. So Kamala is at 12% with Muslims in Michigan. Stein at 40, Trump at 18. 12 is even lower. Remember, there was that poll that came out many months ago.
So these two podcasters, who by no stretch of the imagination are friends or supporters of Donald Trump or the Republicans, are sounding the alarm right now. And this is something that I've talked about so often. I've talked about this with, whenever you go out to dinner, right? You're talking with your friends, people in the community. We've got friends from it's a pretty eclectic, group here in North Carolina. And whether you're talking with American Muslims, or you're talking with Black Americans, you're talking with Chinese Americans, or you're talking with, whoever, Asian Americans. And I brought this thing up. I said that Donald Trump, Hispanic Americans, Latin Americans, Latinos, you're always asking them, where is their stance? Are there conservative values with them? Are they Republican? Are they Democrat? And you find that a lot of them will say, you know what, this time you were right, Nasser. We're voting for Donald Trump. And I asked him, I said, what's the change? And there's so many different answers, but basically it runs to the point of that they've had enough of the bullshit of the leftist, liberal, democratic institution. They're basically saying things were so much better when Donald Trump was there. And if they can just sort of push aside, some of Trump's whatever faults they may perceive, but on terms of the economy, in terms of strength, in terms of jobs, in terms of more money in their pocket, in terms of the economy, in terms of energy prices down, in terms of fighting the culture wars, fighting, for children's rights, parents' rights, all of those things, they unbelievably have now said, you know what, we're going to go back, with Trump. And as you can see here, folks, I've said this before, Jill Stein's at 40%. Trump's at 18% in Michigan, folks. In Michigan, he's at 18%. And Harris is at 12%. A small, tiny block but in something that was decided by less than tens of thousands of votes. It's absolutely crucial. Of course, the New York Post is saying, incredibly, given Trump spent years arguing for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims. That's not exactly true. He didn't want that. He was talking about people that are unvetted in that country, not for them to be entering the United States. However, take a look at what's happening in Nevada. Dead heat with Harris. But dead heat? He's getting 27% of the Muslim vote. Stein's in third, 13%. Harris is at 29%. I think that's even higher. And of course, Muslims are not a monolith, come from all over the globe. White Muslims and black Muslims and not so white Muslims and not so dark Muslims and not so black Muslims. You know, they're Arab Muslims, Egyptian Muslims. I mean, they're coming from all over the globe. It's a huge monolith. But of course, we're only talking about those in the United States of America. And even there, for example, in Michigan, 70% of the Arab American population is Muslim, but 30% is Christian. And then you've got, you know, some other factions in there from Arab states that are, you know, pseudo-Christian, they're Coptic Christian, there's Zoroastrian. I mean, there's other small, relatively, you know, minor different pockets, and some of them are not religious at all. But now, if you think these two are sounding alarm, wait till you hear what Kyle Kulinski over at the Secular Talk has to say about this. And let's watch Kyle, with his white hair, talk about what's happening with the Muslims in Michigan as well as the other battleground states. Let's see what Kyle has to say. Watch this.
Really interesting for a number of reasons. So, CAIR is the Council on American and Islamic Relations, CAIR, okay? And they're a Muslim group, and usually, you know, I've seen them get involved with different court cases when there's some anti-Muslim law that shouldn't be on the books, and they'll go to court to try to slap that down. They fought Trump's Muslim ban. They've done a lot of work along those lines. Well, they commissioned a poll and asked a bunch of Muslim voters around the country who they prefer for president. And the results are astonishing. So look at this. First of all, Arizona, 35% of Muslim American voters say they support Jill Stein. 29% say Kamala Harris, 15% say Trump. Michigan, 40% say Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. 18% say Trump, 12% say Harris. Wisconsin, Jill Stein, 44%. Kamala Harris, 39%. Trump, 8%. Georgia, this, I believe, is where Kamala starts getting the better of Jill Stein. Kamala, 43%. Jill Stein, 17%. Trump, 14%. Pennsylvania, Kamala, 37%. Stein, 25%. Trump, 8%. Nevada, Trump, 27%. Kamala, 26%. Stein, 13%. Interesting. Apparently, the Muslim Americans in Nevada are the most right-wing of the Muslims in the country. But these numbers, guys, these numbers are astonishing. These are astonishing numbers. So in multiple swing states, Jill Stein is polling higher with Muslim American voters than Kamala Harris. Multiple swing states. Now, if you're a Democratic insider and you look at this, you might say, well, who really cares? Because overall, the percentage of the vote that Jill Stein is going to get, maybe if she performs well, it's 3%, 3.5%. In reality, it'll probably be closer to 1 or 2%, but ultimately it might even end up under 1%. So that's a tiny bit, not really that big a deal. Let's overlook it, right? That's what some Democratic insiders might say. Here's the problem with that. The problem with that is, even in an election where the Electoral College, where one of the candidates gets over 300 Electoral College votes, right, and seemingly wins comfortably, even if they win by 7 million in the popular vote. These elections have come down to tens of thousands of votes in the swing states. So it's really not that many votes. I know Joe Biden won by 7 million. I know Hillary won by 3 million in terms of the popular vote. But it really was, 40,000 votes in the swing states for Hillary, a little more for Biden, maybe over 100,000 or something for Biden, a couple 100,000. That's really not that much. In a country of over 300 million people, that's really not that much to decide the election. And so what people need to understand is this, and this is what the Democrats need to grasp. When people like me and others like me come out and say, hey man, stop arming and funding the genocide of Palestinians, stop giving Netanyahu, a war criminal, more money and more weapons on a regular basis and then sitting back as he carpet bombs children. Stop doing that.
Folks, I didn't think I'd be saying this anytime soon. But I got to agree with our friend here, Kyle. I agree with basically everything I said, and it's something that I've been saying for a very, very, very long time. The Democrats, if they're thinking that they're going to overlook this contingency of the Muslim vote, they're in for a rude awakening in Michigan, folks, a rude awakening. There's a young girl, I think her name is Shami Shabant, and she is leading something with Dr. Abdus Salam. And you can look this up in Michigan. It's not just Michigan Uncommitted. These people were part of a movement called Biden Uncommitted. Okay? They were basically Biden no more. And when Biden obviously was pushed out, shoved out on his wheelchair up over the cliff, the political cliff, they changed it to Harris. No way. Their main mantra is that they're going to do everything within their political power to cause a destruction of the Democratic Party in terms of making sure that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, AWOL, Walz, do not become president, vice president of the United States of America. That's what they're trying to do. And they don't care if Trump comes in or anybody else comes in. And they're going to do everything in their power. They're going to vote as a block against. Does that mean they're going to give their vote to Jill Stein? Great. They're going to give it to Cornel West? Great. If they're going to give it to somebody else? Great. If they're not going to go out there and vote, okay, fine. But I believe this movement is not just uncommitted. They're coming out and voting for somebody else, just not Kamala Harris. And as far as what he was talking about, aid to Israel, I totally agree with that. Totally. I've been against foreign aid for the longest freaking time. When I ran for Congress here in the primary for the Republican side, I was the first American Muslim that ran, second generation, in a primary in North Carolina. And it was a first time foray, but one of my talking points was the fact that if we're never going to be able to get rid of foreign aid, folks, it's just so entrenched in our politics. That's just pie in the sky thinking. But putting limitations on our foreign aid, that's something that I think that can be negotiated. So one of my things was that if you want to spend $1 and allocate it to go to foreign aid to any country, doesn't matter whoever, you had to make sure and allocate. At that time I said $10 had to be allocated and be funded prior to that $1 going out. So if you had $1 million going to a country, $10 million had to first be earmarked to be spent in the United States on whatever was needed to be spent on. That number can be negotiated, but I think maybe start it higher because, you're always going to negotiate lower. So make it $20 for every $1 that goes out. That would make people start to think and say, if I got to earmark $20 for every one I send out, let's think about this. But that was my position among many. So, kudos to Kyle here. But like I said, is he's pointing out these numbers from CARE. This is the same exact thing that's happening within the black community. They no longer want to be duped, folks. That's an acronym I coined, duped, D-U-P-E-D, the Democratic Utopian Plantation for the expansion of dependency. That's what they do. They put everybody on a plantation, political plantation, so to speak. The blacks are on a political plantation. The Asians are on a political plantation. The Hispanics are on a political plantation. LGBTQIAMOUSE. They're on a political plantation. Gays are on a political plantation. Lesbians are on a political plantation. Jews are on a political plantation. Muslims are on a political plantation. Did I say lesbians? Lesbians are on a political plantation. Transgenders are on a political plantation. Atheists on a political plantation, agnostics, you name it. Everybody's slice and dice, slice and dice, slice and dice. Put them on the political spectrum. Intersectionality, totem pole, oppression Olympics, whatever you want to call it. That's what's going on. That's what's happening. So, I basically just leave it. You saw the numbers. I could go on and on and on and bring up the New York Post articles that this was, referencing as well. Go read them. I really believe that Michigan, and look what happened in 2016. Look at what Jill Party, and people don't realize this. Jill Stein and the Green Party were not on the ballots in 2020. They were not allowed to go on the ballots and not be a part of the democratic process, but they are now in 6 of the 7 battleground states. So I leave it at that. I just want to wish you the very best. Thanks for taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasser Shake Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasser. If you've done so already, subscribe, like, share, and follow us. Always helps us. You all know what to do. My final thought is always, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.